Welcome back, everybody. In the Marvel Universe, the Red Skull is the ultimate symbol of fascist ideology, a monster who believes in racial purity and the destruction of inferior peoples. But what if I told you there is a real-life political figure who mirrors this comic book villain in ideology, rhetoric, and even strategy? Enter Stephen Miller, the architect of Donald Trump's most hardline immigration policies, and a man whose vision for America has drawn chilling comparisons to one of fiction's most infamous villains. Let's break it down. Every villain has an origin story. Red Skull-born Johann Schmidt was radicalized by Schmazis, becoming Schmittler's enforcer. Schmidt was born in an unnamed German village to Hermann Schmidt, who was an abusive drunk, and Martha, a long-suffering mother who died in childbirth. Blaming Johann for her death, Hermann attempted to drown the infant, but was stopped by the doctor. Hermann later committed suicide, leaving Johann orphaned. Raised in an orphanage, Johann ran away at age 7, surviving as a beggar and a thief. Stephen Miller's journey began in Santa Monica, where classmates recall him as a teenage firebrand who told Latino peers to go back to their own countries, and idolized far-right figures like piece of shit David Horowitz, a man who was tied to white nationalist groups. A young Stephen Miller, clad in button-up shirts and a pocket square, would stride through the halls of his liberal, diverse high school like a conservative crusader behind enemy lines. At least in his own mind, buddy. He thrives on confrontation, challenging Latino classmates to speak English, demanding school announcements be English only, and accusing dissenters of being anti-American. As a teen, Johann worked menial jobs, but frequently landed in prison. His only kindness came from Esther, a Jewish shopkeeper's daughter, whom he later murdered in a fit of rage after she rejected his advances. This was his first taste of power through violence. Johann aligned himself with Weimar-era gangs and Schmazis, switching loyalties for survival. He murdered Schmazis whom trusted him, proving his ruthlessness and ambition. I only giggle because it's very hard to always call it Schmazis. Contrary to earlier myths, Johann orchestrated his meeting with Schmittler. He disguised himself as a bellhop, and he even went so far as trying to stage an assassination attempt on him, saving him at the last minute. Recognizing Johann's hatred and intelligence, Schmittler personally trained him, rejecting standard SS drills. He gave Johann the Red Skull mask and uniform, dubbing him as Red Skull, a symbol of Schmazi terror, while Schmittler maintained a respectable image. And I'm kind of fascinated by this. It's almost like Emperor Palpatine and Darth Vader, but not really, because once Palpatine put on the Imperial robes and just said, heck with it, this is who I am, he said fuck all to decorum. But Mustache Man having plausible deniability, I don't know, just kind of fits within his character. Though initially apolitical, Johann adopted Schmittler's fascist rhetoric as a tool for power. His nihilism merged with Schmazi dogma, targeting Jews, communists, and weakness as enemies. As Schmittler's enforcer, Johann led espionage, assassinations, and psychological warfare. His brutality in purging towns and orchestrating subversion made him infamous. Miller refines his tactics, cloaking racism in intellectualism. He organizes Islamo-Fascism Awareness Week and becomes a cable news pundit, arguing that America without our culture is a body without a soul. He collaborates with David Horowitz Freedom Center. It's an anti-Muslim hate group, as defined by the Southern Poverty Law Center, and rubs shoulders with Richard Spencer, an alt-right figurehead. His op-eds and TV appearances frame immigrants as existential threats, a narrative he'll later weaponize in politics. Miller apprenticed under nativist icons like Jeff Sessions and Michelle Bachmann, honing his skills in legislative sabotage. He torpedoes bipartisan immigration reform by flooding Congress with fear-mongering dossiers and conspiring with Breitbart News. Miller champions the eugenics law passed in 1924 that favored Northern Europeans. There were leaked emails that revealed his fixation with racial exclusion. By the way, this law was a particular favorite of Schmittler. Yep. Recruited by Steve Bannon, Miller becomes Trump's id, scripting the American Carnage inauguration speech and engineering policies like family separations and the Muslim ban. Red Skull infiltrates governments by placing Hydra agents in key positions, much like MAGA. For example, he posed as a U.S. Secretary of State Del Rusk to orchestrate a biological attack at Mount Rushmore, destabilizing the nation under the guise of policy. Hydra fronts as legitimate businesses to fund operations and manipulate economies. The group also steals advanced tech to weaponize it. Hydra conducts high-profile attacks to instill fear. Red Skull's World War II Wolfpack submarines targeted civilian ships to cripple morale. Using tech like the Nolotron and Dusk of Death, Hydra brainwashes enemies or entire populations. Skull allies with villains like Dr. Doom and Thanos, albeit briefly, to share resources. His cabal included MODOK and Atuma to counter the Avengers. Skull twists patriotism into fascism, recruiting disillusioned soldiers, and manipulating media to spread xenophobia. Miller has deep ties to Breitbart News, where he leaked anti-immigrant narratives to shape Trump's 2016 campaign messaging. Miller employs hyperbolic language, like calling immigrants invaders, linking immigrants to crime, to galvanize Trump's base. Miller orchestrates a deluge of executive orders, things like ending birthright citizenship, suspending habeas corpus for deportations, to overwhelm legal challenges and public resistance, directs immigration and customs enforcement to bypass traditional enforcement protocols, ordering mass arrests at places like Home Depot and 7-Elevens to inflate deportation numbers. His nonprofit files lawsuits to block progressive policies and erode judicial checks on executive power. Advocates for judges who align with his ideology, leveraging Trump's judicial appointments to entrench long-term influence. Engineered the Los Angeles crackdown by deploying the National Guard after ICE raids sparked protests, framing it as an insurrection to justify extreme measures. He also overreacts to satire. Miller dismisses humanitarian critiques of family separations, insisting on zero tolerance as a deterrent. This isn't just a nerdy comparison. The Red Skull is fiction. Miller's policies have real victims, from kids in cages to ICE raids at Home Depot. His legacy is a test of whether democracy can survive its own villains. If Stephen Miller has its way, here are some of the changes we could look forward to. Mass raids and military enforcement. ICE raids on steroids, basically. Miller has pushed for 3,000 arrests daily of undocumented immigrants. This would lead to labor market collapse. Industries like agriculture, construction, and hospitality would face severe shortages. Farmers in Texas already report zero workers showing up due to fear of raids. Humanitarian crises, families would be torn apart at scale. Urban unrest, protests like the 2025 LA crackdown where Miller deployed the National Guard against demonstrators. This would escalate, possibly leading to violent clashes. End of birthright citizenship and denaturalization? Well, if you're listening to this after 6:30, which is the day of recording, you already know how that is going. and it's not looking good. This would lead to a stateless population. Families could be trapped in legal limbo with children rendered undocumented despite being born in the United States. Agencies like ICE and USIS would be overwhelmed by litigation and enforcement logistics, creating bureaucratic chaos. Refugee and the asylum system would be dismantled. Muslim Ban 2.0 would go into effect. This would lead to global isolationism. The U.S. would abandon its historic role as a haven for refugees, which would damage diplomatic ties. Miller is known also for targeted persecution. Activists, journalists, local officials resisting policies could face federal retaliation. Miller has falsely linked immigration to voter fraud, justifying voter purges and suppression in Democratic-leaning areas. Worst case scenario, it would be a de facto police state. Miller has floated building large-scale staging grounds near borders to detain families, hopefully not like CCOT. The 2025 LA intervention could become routine. The U.S. would face sanctions and censure for human rights violations, akin to responses to Hungary's Orban or El Salvador's Bukele, which are both de facto police states. Kids, we can't stop the Red Skull. He's a work of fiction, and he makes Marvel a lot of money. But we could stop Stephen Miller's policies. And if we could, I would feel very good about that. As always, fare thee well, and take care, my friends. Cue the music.